You've spent your life smiling politely through stadium roars, wondering why the world's most common language sounds like a heavy, incomprehensible static. It's a heavy realization to carry, that the very thing which makes others feel home makes you feel like an uninvited guest. As I sit here writing this, the house is finally still, the kind of silence that only comes at 2 a.m. There's a single street lamp outside my window, casting a long, amber shadow across my desk, and I can't help but think about how much of our lives we spend performing interest just to keep the peace. I remember being 8 years old, watching my father lean toward the television, his entire posture transformed by a game I couldn't understand.
Back then, I thought I'd eventually grow into it, that some manhood or social switch would flip, and I'd suddenly feel the magic. But that switch never moved. Now, as an adult, that childhood confusion has hardened into a strange kind of exhaustion. You've learned the names of players just to survive a water cooler conversation, yet you still feel that sharp, cold contrast. They are connected to a shared heartbeat, and you are just a witness. Here is the core paradox. The very independent streak that makes you an original thinker, the shield that protects your identity, is the same wall that prevents you from feeling the warm, mindless safety of the herd. It isn't a defect of personality. It is a fundamental difference in how your soul recognizes belonging. To the outside world, you might just seem unathletic or disinterested, but psychologically, what is happening is a profound bypass of collective effervescence. Sociologically, sports are a secular religion. When a stadium erupts, it creates a psychic tide that pulls individuals out of their private anxieties and into a massive shared ego. But for you, this tide never arrives. Instead of feeling lifted by the crowd, you experience a form of cognitive dissociation. It's like watching a movie where the sound is 5 seconds out of sync with the picture. You see the emotion, you recognize the cues, but the resonance is missing. It's like being the only person in a room who can see that the emperor has no clothes, yet everyone else is crying tears of joy over the fabric. This brings us to a concept known as in-group cohesion. For most humans, the team serves as a biological shortcut to tribal safety. Their nervous systems are wired for proxy achievement, a phenomenon where the brain's reward centers fire as if they personally had conquered a rival. But your brain operates on a different frequency. You likely possess a high degree of internalized validation. Your dopamine doesn't come from a proxy win, it requires a tangible, personal contribution to reality. In your body, this lack of tribal wiring feels like a low-humming radar that is always searching for a signal it cannot find. When a friend says, "We won last night," your brain pauses just for a microsecond, because it knows, logically and emotionally, that we did nothing. You didn't play. You didn't sweat. This isn't cynicism, it's a strict, almost painful commitment to authenticity of experience. You have been developmentally rewired to seek meaning in the specific and the personal, rather than the abstract and the collective. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from being a social translator. You've likely spent years developing a mental script. The vague nod when a coworker mentions a trait. The practiced, "How about that game?" that you use as a shield to deflect further questioning. You aren't lying to be deceptive. You are lying to be safe. When you are socially dissynchronized, every sports bar or office party becomes a theater where you are the only one who hasn't read the play.
You watch the faces around you, the genuine agony, the unadulterated joy, and you feel a twinge of envy, not for the game itself, but for the simplicity of it. There is a terrible weight in having to think about how to belong, while everyone else is simply breathing it. This performance creates a secondary layer of isolation. Because you are pretending to share in the we, you never truly show up as the I. You remain a ghost in the room, haunted by the suspicion that if you were to speak your truth, that you find the spectacle hollow, the fabric of your social world might begin to fray. But here is the shift. What if this lack of collective effervescence isn't a wall, but a vantage point? When you cannot access the low-cost intimacy of the tribe, you are forced to build intimacy from the ground up. You don't get the shortcut of a jersey or a team logo.
Every connection you make, every passion you pursue, and every we you eventually find has to be earned through genuine shared values, rather than proximity to a scoreboard. You are the keeper of this singular gaze. While the crowd looks at the field, you are the one looking at the stars, or the architecture, or the way the light hits the floor. You see the world in its raw, unnarrated state. There is a quiet, radical power in being someone who cannot be swept away by a tide. It is okay to be unsynced. It is okay to be the person who finds more home in a quiet book, a complex equation, or a late-night conversation than in a stadium of 50,000. You aren't missing the human experience. You are having a specifically individual one. The heart that beats alone isn't broken. It's just listening to a different rhythm. The price we pay for this detachment isn't measured in missed games. It's measured in a slow, cumulative erosion of belonging. It's the invisible grief of standing in a room full of people who are vibrating with a shared joy, while you feel nothing. Or worse, you feel a mounting pressure to perform a ghost of that joy just to avoid the interrogation. Why don't you care? How can you not be excited? Soren Kierkegaard once wrote that the crowd is untruth. He believed that whenever we merge our identity into a mass, we lose the sharp, agonizing, but necessary edges of our individual spirit. But Kierkegaard didn't mention how cold it gets outside that crowd. To be a non-fan in a sports-saturated culture is to live in a state of permanent minority dissent. You are constantly sacrificing your authenticity for a seat at the table. You nod, you smile, you learn the shorthand. But every time you pretend to care about a Hail Mary or a strikeout, you are telling a small, silent lie to yourself. And that's the real pain, isn't it? It's not the lack of a hobby, it's the exhausting 24/7 surveillance of your own expressions. It's the fear that if you are truly yourself, quiet, analytical, unmoved by the tribal roar, you will be seen as broken or arrogant. You aren't trying to be superior, you're just trying to survive the Monday morning meeting without feeling like an alien. Let's be honest for a second. It's incredibly lonely to realize that the world's primary bonding agent simply doesn't stick to you. You begin to wonder if your heart is made of a different material, one that can't be ignited by the fires of the collective. I'll admit, seeing myself in these patterns was a bitter pill to swallow, because these aren't just preferences, they are survival strategies that have seeped into every corner of our adult lives. You see, if you grew up feeling out of sync with the tribal ritual, you likely became an adult who manages life through a series of complex internal scripts. Let's look at how this manifests. First, there is manual socialization. In the workplace, you don't just chat, you calculate. You've developed a mental database of sports-adjacent phrases just to bridge the gap during small talk, a social camouflage that leaves you drained before the actual work even begins. Sound familiar? Then there is the romantic barrier. In relationships, you might feel a sudden, sharp pang of guilt when your partner is engrossed in a game. You want to share that world with them, but the door is locked from the inside. You end up sitting next to them, physically close, but worlds apart, wondering if your lack of passion is actually a lack of love. It isn't, but try telling your nervous system that. Consider the burden of the intellectual shield. Because you can't bond through low-stakes tribalism, you often over-intellectualize everything. You become the person who brings a philosophical critique to a casual dinner. It's a way of saying, if I can't be part of your tribe, I'll build a fortress of ideas where I'm safe. For some, it's parenting projection. If you have children, you might feel a secret, irrational panic when they show interest in sports. You worry they'll join a world where you can't follow them. Or worse, you unintentionally gaslight their excitement because it triggers your own old memories of exclusion. You may also experience hyper-vigilant observation. You've become a master at reading the energy of a room. Because you aren't swept up in the emotion, you are the only one noticing the subtle shifts in tension, the forced laughter, the underlying aggression. You're the designated driver of every social interaction. Does it
feel like a burden? Finally, there is the chronic imposter. Even when you succeed in your career or your art, there's a part of you that feels like a fraud. You think, if they knew I don't even understand the basic metaphors of the game, they'd realize I don't belong here at all.
Let's pause here, because I know how heavy this realization feels. I know this part feels like I'm reading your private diary. It felt like that for me too when I first started tracing these lines. We have to stop calling this a flaw. These behaviors aren't your personality. They are the scars left by a world that tried to force a round peg into a very loud, very square hole. The first step toward healing isn't learning to love the game. It's the radical act of witnessing. It's looking at that exhausted, performing version of yourself and saying, I see you. You don't have to pretend anymore. Your silence is enough. It's exhausting, isn't it? Trying to find a home in a stadium when all you ever wanted was a sanctuary?
So, where do we go from here? How do we begin to bridge the gap between the world's roar and our own persistent silence? Maybe the first step isn't to fix our lack of interest, but to finally let out a breath we've been holding for decades. Just exhale. I want you to try something with me. Right now, wherever you are, notice the tension in your shoulders. Notice that slight reflexive clench in your jaw, the one that's always ready to mirror a social cue or fake a reaction. Let it go. Just for a moment, give yourself permission to be uninteresting by the world's standards. Healing in this context begins with a radical form of inner child reparenting. We need to go back to that version of ourselves standing on the edge of the playground, the one who felt a strange cold shiver of wrongness because they didn't care who caught the ball. We need to sit down next to that child and tell them, you aren't missing a piece. You are simply building a different kind of puzzle. We have to validate the fact that your lack of tribal instinct isn't a void, it's a sanctuary. I'll be honest with you, I don't have this all figured out. As I sit here guiding you through these thoughts, I'm still practicing these boundaries myself. Just last week, I found myself in a conversation where I felt that old, familiar pressure to perform interest in a local team's victory. I felt the urge to nod, to pretend, to blend in. It is a non-linear journey. We are unlearning a lifetime of social camouflage, and that doesn't happen overnight. I'm a fellow traveler on this road, stumbling just as often as I'm walking. We're doing this together. This is where the shadow work begins. We have to stop treating our outsider status as a shameful secret and start seeing it as an essential part of our wholeness. Carl Jung once remarked, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And for us, who we are is someone who finds more resonance in a solitary thought, a quiet craft, or a deep one-on-one conversation than in the vicarious thrill of a stadium. We aren't trying to build a machine that finally enjoys sports. We are learning to be kind to a wounded heart that was told its natural frequency was boring or wrong. Healing is the process of unclenching that hyper-individualized shield and realizing that while we may never share the collective effervescence of the crowd, we possess something just as vital, a direct, unmediated connection to our own internal world. As we move forward, let your goal be softness. When the world demands you join the roar, allow yourself the grace to remain quiet. When you feel the social tax rising, remind yourself that your authenticity is worth more than a moment of tribal belonging. You aren't a broken fan. You are an intact human being who requires a different kind of fuel. The depth of a well is never measured by the noise at its surface, but by the profound stillness at its core. If this reflection felt like a mirror to your own quiet world, I invite you to share your story in the comments. It's a small way for us, the unsynced, the observers, the perpetual outsiders, to find each other in the silence. Subscribe if you'd like to continue this journey into the deeper parts of who we are. Remember, you don't need to be fixed. You only need to be brave enough to be whole. Stay curious and be kind to your own quiet heart.